So I'd like to invite Mike to come up and share his journey with us today. So I'm going to be hard on you today. And what I mean by that is we started out with the same questions that I send to everybody when I ask them to speak. What about your family of origin? What about coming to the Bay Area? Things like that. So what I want to do is, can you give us the shortest version of that possible? Because there's some really great things that I want to talk to you about.
Well, if I prolong it long enough, you'll never get to those things. Yeah. The origin, as far as my family history of religion, both parents grew up in rural Kentucky. On my father's side, his dad was a farmer, a teacher, and a preacher. But I never got a chance to meet him because he died 6 or 7 years before I was born. My dad was the youngest of 9 children. I was the youngest of 3 children, so he was born before the Civil War, which gives you an idea of how long. On my mother's side, my grandfather was a postman, but his father was a doctor in Western Kentucky. So if you're in that part of the world, usually you have your choice between either Southern Baptist or Methodist. If you're Catholic, it's probably the next town over. But no monasteries, no synagogues, of course. You might be Pentecostal too. But so the history was we kind of grew up Methodist. And the first memories I have of church are we moved a few times because of Dad's job to a small town in upstate New York, First Methodist Church, Harold Buckingham pastor. And I was very active at 8 years old at the MYF.
Methodist Youth Fellowship. I only know that because I had a friend who was always going to MYF.
Right. Sunday school, and then Sunday school was before church, so I got a double dose, and I would go to church and wait for one of those endless sermons to end, which, in those days I got an allowance, 25 cents. 10 cents went to the movie, double header, a double feature usually, shoot 'em ups, movie tone news, a cereal, and cartoon. 5 cents for a candy bar, 5 cents for a soft drink. The other 5 cents went in the offering plate at church.
Very good.
So I more than tithed as an 8-year-old. So that was kind of the beginning of my religious orientation. We got married I went in the Coast Guard. Oh, I'll back up. In college, I was a philosophy and religion major. Entertained for a little while thoughts of entering the ministry. That passed, fortunately for me. But I went in the Coast Guard as an officer and a gentleman, and found out that on board ship with my background, they were hoping for an engineer, but I got to do Sunday service, gunnery officer, and supply officer. So after Coast Guard, met my wife, fell in love, got married, started having children, got to the West Coast, and we were looking for a church. And we tried a few different churches out and really could not find one that kind of fit our needs or desires. And in 1972, we moved to Ladera. Found that there was a community church. We liked the idea of a community church. Came down, Bob Nordstrom was the pastor. We enjoyed his sermons, and so we began participating in the church. I mean, we were attracted by the congregation, highly educated, liberal, by the music, which was outstanding. And so we've been 50 years members of the church. And during that time, did a little bit of everything from moderator to usher. Leslie and I have been on just about every committee going at one time or another. So we feel like we grew up here and it was a great place to bring our kids.
So when I met you, one of the very first things that I felt from you, this is why I'm going to be a little harder on you, because I've got questions that I wanted to bring out that I didn't give to you beforehand. So he's coming right off the cuff here, but I think they're okay.
No,
I'm sure you're going to handle them good. When I met you right after I came here, I think we were either standing in the parking lot and you were walking Gracie, or we were over in front of Conditory, I'm not sure. But you said to me, I'm so grateful. Everything for me now is just like icing on the cake or extra gravy. Tell us about that feeling.
Well, I've been very lucky. My entire life has been fortunate, and so, I mean, what could be better to be married to the person you love in a community like Ladera, where we raise the kids, have good friends. It just doesn't get much better than that.
Okay. So another thing that you and I have talked about is your work, the publishing and things like that. And at least for me, I don't know how many people think about philosophical things like Yogi Berra, but you have a particular connection to the Berra family. And I remember telling you the one quote that I remembered at the time from Yogi Berra: when you come to a fork in the road, take it. Can you explain that to everybody here?
Sure. Yeah, actually, one of my colleagues at McGraw-Hill was an editor, and his dad was the doctor for the New York Yankees, so he got a chance to sit in the dugout as a kid and watch some of the Yankee great teams of the past, and became very good friends with Yogi. And Yogi lived one town up from us. We were in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, and Yogi lived in Montclair. And when he told people how to get to his house, he lived on a cul-de-sac. And he said, so when you get to a fork in the road, take it, because you can go either way and you're going to end up at his house. So it made sense, you know. Like another one of his quotes is, nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded, you know. So.
Right.
A lot of wisdom. Yeah.
So, and then another story, you didn't know this, but you happened to mention a famous writer that you worked with, but this writer, Raymond Carver, was one of my favorite writers, poet, short story writer. And you had the distinction of firing him.
I did.
So, would you share that story with us a little bit?
Yeah, John Matthews knew Ray too. When I was hired to come out and start a college operation for IBM, John Matthews actually worked with Ray Carver, and we inherited a company that had the right heart but was doing everything completely wrong when it came to college publishing. College publishing, you go out and find an author who is usually a professor who creates the material on his or her own nickel. You're not paying the salary or the benefits, and then you pay a royalty instead. IBM thought it would be a good idea to bring writers in and create the material in-house, which was very expensive. And Ray Carver at the time was our publicity manager, and totally bored, and just had a very hard time living in the corporate world. His real passion was to create, to write. And so after I came out and started making some changes, Ray had, at that time, had just won the O. Henry Award for writing, which had a nice little cash stipend. And he asked me, he said, is there any way that I could get some severance if I left? And I said, yeah, we'll work it out, because the plan was we didn't need Ray, we could outsource that material. And so I checked with headquarters and they agreed to a generous settlement. And so I had the pleasure of firing Ray Carver. And in his biography, he mentions being fired and getting a nice settlement. So, yeah. He went on to do great things. Yeah.
Yeah. If any of you have not read Raymond Carver, it's a treat to read his stories and his poetry. And he went on to win more awards.
Yes, he
well.
did. Yeah.
So
he was considered America's greatest short story writer by many critics.
So in preparation for today, you gave me this book, a collection of life stories that you wrote, and both you and Leslie wrote.
Yeah, Leslie has one
as well. And there are a number of questions that come up in this book, I guess, to kind of help you move along. But there were a few that kind of stood out to me, and and I thought it was kind of fun. Did you ever get a terrible haircut?
Constantly. Through today, yes. Yeah. The funniest story about the haircut was my new father-in-law mentioned he was going to go get a haircut, and I asked if I could tag along. And he said, yeah. He said, they take walk-ins. And so we saw Woody, the barber. And there were two barbers, and we checked with Woody to see if he could take both of us, and said, yeah. So Woody got through with his person first, and so his chair became open, and he said to my father-in-law, Cliff, come on over and get your hair cut. And Cliff said, no, we'll let my son-in-law, because he knew Woody. Well, Woody was probably a good barber when he was sober, but he wasn't sober all that often. So he cut my hair, and Cliff sat there and kind of watched, and everything was going good, except one sideburn was about here and the other was about here. And I said, can you even that up? And stood back, and now one sideburn was here and the other was here. Well, by the time he finished, I was pretty much scalped, and Cliff was enjoying it, so, yeah. Yeah.
So obviously the publishing industry has changed quite a bit over the course of your life. And I know that you could tell us about that, but I'm interested in knowing what else you've noticed that's changed, that has been the biggest change for you personally over that time.
Oh, well, the internet, you know, I started a publishing company, and it did very well up to the point of the internet. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, everything that we were publishing, which were very kind of simple, organized, common sense self-help books, people wanted them for free on the internet. And so it really changed the whole industry around. And now it's self-publishing and print on demand, and everybody can be an author. So the rules, like a lot of things that technology has brought, to change things completely, word processing. So big change.
of all the things, well, let me back up. What would be something that we should know about you that we likely don't know about you?
I was born at home on July 4th with no electricity. I came a bit early, and there was a thunderstorm, and it wiped out all of the house electricity, so I was born by lantern light 3 weeks earlier or so. That's one thing. Second thing is I've had the good fortune to visit all 50 states and spend at least one night in all 50 states, thanks to my job and travels, those kinds of things.
And looking at Ladera Community Church now versus when you came, knowing who we are now, what advice do you have for us?
All right, that's a tough question. Yeah, I mean, nationally, the church membership continues to decline. The youth doesn't really seem to attend church very, very much. So we've seen the congregation here go from a high of well over 100 down to currently, 50 or so active members. And it's been a real change. I applaud the Ladera Church for doing what it is doing to attract people and to provide the spiritual needs, and of course the great music, which is terrific. So I don't have any magic, no secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. It's a kind of a hard situation, but I think that at least for me, I feel like having you here is a great boon to us and to everything that we're doing here. And
thank you.
Leslie as well. I appreciate so much everything that you guys do. It feels like there's that kind of connection to the world, both to that world that was way back with that birth in Kentucky, to the Raymond Carver, to the change with the internet and things like that. You're our connection.
Well, thank you.
And I appreciate so much. Last thing, do you recommend people to write their life story?
I do. I do. This is was a gift from our daughters. It's called Storyworth, and essentially they make it easy. You get a question a week, and you can, if you don't like the question, you can move to a different question or choose one of your own. But the idea is a legacy for children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, hopefully. So it's like having a term paper every week, but it was an enjoyable process. You got the question on Monday morning, and that gave you pretty much all week to think about it before you wrote your response over the weekend. So, yeah.
So what question was the biggest surprise for you?
Huh.
You want to take a look just to,
Yeah.
there's a lot of great questions in there.
Haircut was one, Yeah, one of the hardest is what are you really hard on yourself about? Have you ever found out something you wish you'd never known? That was an interesting one. tell me about one of the best days you remember. So questions of that type. Yeah, they're good.
Well, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing with us.
Thank you,
And,
Jeff. Yeah.
It's so great to have you here and to share in the way that we did. And thank you for allowing me to kind of veer off the normal questions and being open to.
Well, my lawyer said
Surprise.
it's never a good idea to ignore subpoenas, so
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.